This anime tries to sell itself as a sweet romantic story, but underneath the pastel visuals is something that feels deeply uncomfortable rather than heart-fluttering. Instead of portraying a wholesome coming-of-age relationship, it leans heavily on a dynamic that feels inappropriate, forced, and emotionally underdeveloped. What could have been a story about protection, healing, or found family turns into something that raises more eyebrows than feelings. The core premise alone is enough to make many viewers uneasy: a 16-year-old high school girl paired romantically with her 26-year-old guardian. Not just an older love interest, a literal adult caretaker figure who has been present since her childhood. Rather than exploring the complexity or ethical issues of this setup, the story treats it as cute, comedic, and aspirational, which makes the tone feel shockingly immature. Romance stories often rely on fantasy, exaggeration, and emotional intensity, but they still need a foundation that feels respectful and believable. Here, the emotional logic frequently collapses. Characters behave less like real people and more like exaggerated tropes designed to force romantic moments, regardless of whether those moments make sense. Another issue is that the anime seems unsure who its audience is. The art style, school setting, and comedic beats suggest a teen romance, yet the central relationship is clearly adult minor-coded. This mismatch creates a strange dissonance where the story feels too shallow for adults but too inappropriate for younger viewers. Ultimately, instead of delivering a tender love story, the series comes across as tone-deaf and oddly juvenile. It simplifies complicated themes into sugary scenes while ignoring the real implications of what it's portraying, which is why many viewers consider it not just flawed, but immature. 1. The 16-year-old times 26-year-old pairing is disturbing. A decade age gap isn't automatically wrong, but context matters. Here, the older character is not just older, he is her guardian, protector, and authority figure. That creates a power imbalance that the story never seriously addresses. Instead of questioning it, the narrative romanticizes it, which feels irresponsible and unsettling. Even worse, the girl is still in high school, emotionally inexperienced, and socially naive. Presenting her infatuation as pure romance rather than adolescent attachment makes the story feel tone-deaf. It reduces complex psychological dynamics to cute jealousy and possessive love. Many viewers would be far less uncomfortable if she were an adult or if the relationship developed after she matured. But portraying this dynamic as acceptable in the present timeline makes it hard to root for the couple. 2. The guardian-to-lover transition is never handled properly. Healthy storytelling would explore the ethical conflict of a caretaker developing romantic feelings. This anime skips that entirely. The male lead shows possessiveness and jealousy from the beginning, yet it's framed as devotion rather than something problematic. There is little introspection, guilt, or struggle about crossing boundaries. That absence makes the relationship feel shallow and poorly thought out. It suggests the writers prioritized romantic tropes over believable emotional development. A more mature story would question whether he should step back for her sake. Here, stepping back rarely feels like a real option. 3. The male lead's overprotectiveness is treated as cute. He interferes with her school life, controls her environment, and intimidates other boys, actions that would normally be red flags. Yet the show presents these behaviors as romantic gestures. This reinforces the harmful idea that jealousy and control equal love. Instead of teaching independence, the story encourages dependence. That's especially troubling given the heroine's young age. What could have been protective concern turns into possessive surveillance, but the tone never shifts to acknowledge that difference. 4. The female lead is written as painfully naive. She is sweet, but also extremely sheltered and childlike for her age. Her innocence often crosses into unrealistic territory, making her feel less like a person and more like a device to trigger protective reactions from the male lead. Rather than showing growth, she repeatedly makes the same naive mistakes. This keeps the story stuck in a loop of rescue scenarios instead of meaningful development. A coming-of-age story should empower its protagonist. Here, she rarely gains agency. 5. The romance lacks emotional depth. Despite the intense premise, the relationship rarely evolves beyond surface-level tropes, jealousy scenes, accidental closeness, flustered reactions, and exaggerated misunderstandings. There are few moments of genuine emotional conversation about trauma, loneliness, or future plans. Without that depth, the romance feels hollow, more like roleplay than connection. It's hard to believe in a love story when the characters barely communicate on a meaningful level. 6. The tone swings between serious and silly. The story involves organized crime, violence, and danger, yet these elements are often played for comedy or brushed aside. One moment suggests real stakes, the next reduces everything to slapstick romance antics. This inconsistency prevents the narrative from building tension or credibility. Mature themes require consistent tone to feel impactful. Instead, the show feels like it can't decide whether it's a dark drama or a fluffy rom-com, so it ends up being neither. 7. School setting feels like a gimmick. Most scenes revolve around school life, but the male lead's presence there is unnatural. An adult constantly hovering around a high school environment strains plausibility. The school becomes less a place for her growth and more a stage for his dominance and jealousy. This undermines the authenticity of the setting. A better approach would have been to let her experience normal teenage life independently. 8. Side characters exist only to create jealousy. Many supporting characters feel like props whose main job is to threaten the main couple's bond. Rival boys, suspicious classmates, and comic relief figures rarely get meaningful arcs of their own. This shallow characterization makes the world feel small and artificial. Strong romance stories usually thrive on a rich supporting cast that challenges the protagonists in meaningful ways. Here, most conflicts feel manufactured rather than organic. 9. It romanticizes dependency instead of growth. The heroine relies heavily on the male lead for safety, decisions, and emotional stability. Instead of gradually becoming independent, she often returns to needing rescue. Dependency can be a valid theme, but it should lead somewhere: healing, autonomy, or transformation. In this case, it mostly reinforces the status quo. That stagnation contributes to the sense that the story is emotionally immature. 10. Shock value replaces substance. Much of the show's attention comes from its controversial premise rather than its storytelling quality. The age gap and guardian dynamic generate discussion, but the narrative itself doesn't justify or explore those choices deeply. It feels like the premise exists to provoke reactions, not to tell a nuanced story. Without strong writing to support it, the concept comes across as shallow. In the end, controversy alone cannot carry a romance. Despite its polished visuals and moments of charm, this anime struggles to deliver a romance that feels healthy, believable, or emotionally mature. Instead of confronting the uncomfortable aspects of its premise, it glosses over them with sugary scenes and exaggerated tropes. For viewers seeking a wholesome protective love story, the series may initially appear appealing. But as the episodes progress, the lack of depth and the normalization of problematic dynamics become harder to ignore. What should feel tender instead feels awkward. The disappointment is even stronger because the premise had potential. A story about a sheltered girl learning to live independently while her guardian learns to let go could have been powerful. Instead, the narrative chooses the easiest, most sensational route. Immature storytelling isn't just about silly jokes or exaggerated reactions, it's about avoiding emotional responsibility. This anime repeatedly sidesteps the deeper questions it raises, leaving viewers with surface-level drama instead of meaningful exploration. Ultimately, whether someone enjoys it or not comes down to personal taste. But for many, the combination of an underage heroine, an adult guardian love interest, and shallow development makes it feel less like a romance and more like a cautionary example of how not to handle complex themes.